Hello, and welcome to this YouTube channel. My name is Nalavan, and I'm going to be your host for the, foreseeable future. What I wanted to go over in this video today, as my first video, is what class should you play in Ashes of Creation? Each and every class base type, and then a multitude of the archetypes that I believe are interesting when will either be meta or very strong in the game. So let's get started. I should mention, I'm also going to be talking a lot about roles and what you want to do in the game, as that's going to have a greater dictation on what class you're going to want to play. So let's get right into the thick of it and start this off. Step 1. Let's take a second and go over the Holy Trinity and what it is and what it does. The Holy Trinity is healers, tanks, DPS form a triangle of what's required in an MMO. So, with that description, this is the easiest one to go over. Do you prefer being a DPS? Prefer tanking damage and crowd controlling enemies? Or do you prefer being that guy in the back that's healing and supporting your allies? First order of business, let's go over what Ashes of Creation calls archetypes. For your archetypes in Ashes of Creation, you have Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Mage, Ranger, Rogue, Summoner, and Tank. After you pick your first archetype, you can later choose a second archetype, or a sub-archetype. These are the exact same archetypes as the primaries, but they do a different thing for your class, depending on which one you choose. There are also 64 total combinations within Ashes of Creation. And I'll use their example here. Certain archetypes are capable of moving the gap between their counterpart, per se. If I'm a tank archetype and my mage is a counter, I can take a mage secondary and bridge the divide slightly, and then move my identity that direction ever so slightly. So I'll explain how these secondary archetypes work really quick. There are 4 primary groups of augments assigned to each archetype in the game. When you choose a secondary class, you can choose those 4 archetypes to add to your skills. So let's use the example that Steven has used before. You can turn the charge ability on a fighter, which normally would move your character towards another player and damage them. He mentioned if you were a mage, you could use the teleportation augment on that charge ability to instantly teleport your character to your target. These are obviously huge changes that are going to dictate how everybody plays differently. Now, of course, there's still going to be a meta spec for every archetype, but with how these augments and abilities are working, in my opinion, there's a lot of options out there to have diversified and crazy builds that no one else might want to run, and your playstyle might adapt perfectly to that. I should mention, your primary archetype can never be changed, but your secondary archetype can be changed. How exactly this will work is apparently through a system of talking to a NPC in a village level node, but that could change later. Now that I've explained archetypes and how they work with augments and such, let's get into what you actually want to do within the game. Are you a large-scale PvP kind of person? Do you prefer smaller scale like ganking or arenas? Maybe even battlegrounds? Or you're just a PvE player? All of these will dictate what you will want to play and start off as in the game. I should note, a lot of information in this video is speculation. I'm going off of what I believe these archetypes and skills may do, not necessarily what is fact. But there is some information already given that lets me kind of guess what these things will be. Step 2. Let's choose a random thing. Let's say you're a large-scale PvP player. You loved playing huge naval battles in ArcAge, or you are a big Warpus World Zerg buster in Guild Wars 2. You're going to want something that does a lot of AoE damage, or can soak a lot of damage, or give a lot of AoE support to your allies. So you're looking for something more along the lines of tank, running tank or something. Maybe playing Bard Cleric. Because what I presume is Bard Cleric is been told by Steven to be kind of a more AoE support heal class with less direct healing than a cleric. But what if you combine those two together? You play a bard, but you augment your abilities with cleric healing. It could increase your AoE healing substantially and make you a healing force to be reckoned with in large scale PvP. As well as that, you'll mainly probably want to play something like a mage or a tank, fighter, cleric, bard, possibly ranger. I don't see rogue being used too much in large scale other than backline ganking, which is a viable and good strategy and I think will actually be a key component, but that depends exactly what you want to do. Let's go off my example. I am a frontline player who gets in the fight, CCs enemies, and also supports my allies. Now, I'm not sure what exactly my role is going to be yet within archetypes, but my primary archetype is very likely to be tank. And then there's a good chance I go either cleric, bard, or fighter, depending on what those augments are going to be. If I'm looking for a more CC oriented, which CC means crowd control for those that don't know, I would go tank likely, as tanks are the likely archetypes who have more CC available to them. Though fighter will also have CC. So it'll be a delicate balance of finding CCs and abilities that mesh well together through the augment system to build your perfect character. But the primary archetype is still important to choose first. Keep that in mind. Let's go over another example. Small scale PvP and arenas. You might want to play a really bursty, fast class, so maybe rogue archetype primary with a mage secondary archetype. That might let you jump in and stun someone, or you could teleport on top of someone with a blink dagger ability, which would be huge for mobility. Getting in and out of a fight really quick, in case you don't have a healer on your side. Of course, you can always run something like Rogue Cleric, and maybe what that'll cause is your abilities might heal you with certain augments. We don't, unfortunately, know any of this yet, but I'm going off speculation to try to give people an idea of what they may want to play in these game modes, and get them really thinking. Lastly, we can go over PvE real quick. You think some abilities and augments might be for these classes down in the comments. Let's say you want to do a lot of damage. Well, your likely choices are going to be Ranger and Mage as your primary archetype, but what would you go as your secondary? I wonder, if you took your primary archetype as Ranger, and then had a secondary archetype of Mage, you could enchant your arrows to do extra elemental damage to a boss, if that boss is vulnerable to that element. It could be what makes or break your DPS in a dungeon fight or a raid boss. These things are really important to think about. And even otherwise, what if there's a type of ranger ability that you might want to augment with your mage to cause the enemy to be more vulnerable to your attacks? Maybe you're a fire mage and there's a ranger augment that makes enemies more vulnerable to fire damage. You would want to have that augment on your ability to let you hit really hard so to get that DPS down. And DPS is so important in this game due to something that Steven mentioned in a recent Q&A. Tagging will be based on whoever tags first and then whoever does the most DPS. So if you tag first, you only need to do, from what he said, these aren't the official numbers yet, 40% of a target's HP, and then you get the kill in the loot. But if somebody did 61% of the damage for a mob, and you tagged it first, they would get the loot. So it's really crucial, especially when you're farming in a kill zone to try and get really good mats, and you don't want to PvP people for the zone, to kill those mobs super fast and get those tags and get that loot quick so that you can get out without risk of some rogue mage ganker blinking in on you and killing you. At step 3, I think every class and combination can be pivotal in this game. You have so many different roles and things going on that no one archetype is likely to be the king of them all. And there's also the archetype giant summons, I believe it's called, which I'll go over in a future video. These are basically really big abilities that multiple people of the same archetype can use. So it's good to have a lot of every single archetype, depending on how powerful these abilities are. Again, we don't really know much about them yet. The speculation is important. We need to be ready for any occasion, and even give these ideas to the devs and say, hey, this is a good augment possibility. Can you turn this into something? Can you make this? It sounds fun. And the way Steven and the Ashes of Creations team have been working with the community, they may actually add that stuff. So it's good to think about. As a conclusion, I just wanted to make this video to try and give you an idea of what's possible with this archetype and sub-archetype system in Ashes of Creation. I want you to really think about what can you create, what can you achieve, what do you want to do within the game, so that you can go out there and have a plan ready to go. And as Ashes of Creation's development progresses, I'll be making more and more videos describing these abilities and going over certain things so that you can make a better and better choice. But it's good to get that baseline in your head right now and think, man, that sounds like a really good idea. I would love to do that. I want to get those thoughts rolling in your mind. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Please make sure to subscribe and like if you'd like to see more content like this.